Of all the things Shaw has done in his career, one of the things he's never done has been agile. So that's something that he's going to have to learn, and that's going to be really exciting for us to see.
Look, the news at the Olympic Games in weightlifting is often when a woman wins a weight category and they're not from China.
Right.
Like, that is a news story, honestly.
The equipment that they use sitting out in the extreme heat becomes very difficult, and we've seen that actually affect the competition in meaningful ways.
Welcome to another fantastic, I'm not burying the lead, fantastic edition of Strength Weekly, the show that keeps you updated from, well, all aspects and all corners of the globe when it comes to the barbell game and stones and even MMA. We touch on that today. Before we get into that, make sure to subscribe to Barbend on YouTube. We would really super appreciate it. I'm David Thomas Tao, joined by the incomparable, the irreplaceable, the extraordinary Philip Bleckman. And we're bringing you lots of news from around the strength game, including what happens when a 400-pound strongman beats up on some people. We have the world's strongest man location and dates for 2024. We also have a world record clean and jerk, Doha, and then a strength tip you're going to love. So how do you get stronger after 40 years old? Phil, the first story we're going to get into today is Brian Shaw, who is retired from strongman competition, went out on a very high note, by the way. He's a four-time world's strongest man. Look, Brian Shaw, he's going to enter the cage or the octagon or whatever. He's going to beat up on some people. At least that's what he hopes to do. He's fighting February 2024. We know that. We don't know who he's fighting. Brian Shaw, MMA. Phil, man, you're the strongman expert. Take it away. What you got for me?
Yeah, so he's going to make his MMA debut in the open category, which just means that he doesn't have to make weight at all. He's just a big guy. He gets to do big guy stuff. And the fight's scheduled right now to take place on February 17th in Qatar. And the prize payout is expected to be absolutely insane for this MMA tournament. Not only will Brian Shaw be fighting at this event, but so will Eddie Hall, and so will Mitchell Hooper, who's the reigning world's strongest man champion. And notably, this is going to take place 2 weeks before the Arnold Strongman Classic, which Hooper is scheduled to compete at as the defending champion. So there's a lot going on here. So it's going to be Eddie Hall versus Mitchell Hooper. Now, we don't know necessarily who Brian Shaw is going to face. However, we do know that Martin Fjord, the actor and stuntman, who's also a gigantic human, is scheduled to fight at this event. And there has been the rumblings that it's going to be Ford versus Shaw, although that is not confirmed anywhere so far.
Brian Shaw competing in the open category makes more sense than anything I've ever heard, because the next weight cutoff in MMA, you have to be under 265, right?
It's a lot of weight. It'd be a lot of weight to cut. Yeah, I mean, let the guy learn how to actually grapple. Give him time. He can't make weight. He got to learn how to grapple.
Brian Shaw competed at or above 400 pounds for a lot of his strongman career, and he competed at like a relatively lean for that sport, 400 plus pounds. No way that man's ever getting down to 260.
Of all the things Shaw has done in his career, one of the things he's never done has been agile. So that's something that he's going to have to learn. And that's going to be really exciting for us to see. Like, he's training with Frank Mir. That's what we saw is that he's training with a multiple time UFC former heavyweight champion. And the biggest takeaway that he got from that, beyond like proper grips when you're on the ground, how to escape from underneath to move into a top position, beyond all that, the thing that he learned the most, he's like, all of these things have to take in energy conservation. And that's doubly so if you're a guy his size.
I want to read a quote. According to Brian Shaw, I will approach this just like I have approached everything else. Put this in front of me. Give me a deadline. Give me an MMA match. I am going to win. I'm going in to dominate. Look, that's scary. If Brian Shaw tells me that, I am fight or flight response. I'm either on the ground, curled up, or I'm running the other way. I do want to say it is not unprecedented. What Mitchell Hooper is doing, fighting during the prime of his strongman career, is unprecedented. But what is not unprecedented is a world's strongest man competitor, a multi-time world's strongest man competitor, a 4-time plus world's strongest man champion moving into MMA. Mariusz Pudzianowski of Poland, after he retired from world's strongest man, is still actually competing in MMA about 14, almost 15 years later, and has had an up and down career. He's fought under a number of different banners. He's had some wins, he's had some losses, some draws. He's had an up and down career, but it's not unprecedented. Brian Shaw is just a massive human. And it adds, I think, in my mind, an intimidation factor for anyone who steps in the ring with him. It kind of reminds me of one of Thor Bjornsson's first fights, where he was gearing up. We knew the Eddie Hall fight was coming, but it kind of kept getting delayed. There were injuries. There were things like that. And Devin Larratt, who is a former Special Forces member and also pro arm wrestler, stepped up to fight Hafthor and was very clearly outmatched in the boxing ring. And even in the post-fight interview was like, man, I'm glad Thor didn't do more damage. He was just like, honestly, I'm glad Thor didn't end my life right now.
If you go back to that, Larratt had 2 weeks. His short notice was the shortest of short. It was hey, can you get here on time? And then we'll figure it out,
He knew. We all knew. That was really a tune-up. My hope is that whomever fights Brian Shaw, we don't know who it is yet. My hope is that they're more than a 2-week notice, right? I really want to see. I think we all want to see a match, right? That's what we want to see.
I would expect that you want some amount of competition, unless you're getting some kind of really spectacular first round blowout. But I don't expect that that's in the cards for guys that have never fought before, because how do you make that kind of move if you don't actually know,
We got to move on because we need to go back to the realm of strongman itself. Phil, the 2024 World's Strongest Man is returning to South Carolina, but things are a little bit different this year. You have covered the World's Strongest Man competition on the ground for the last few years. I consider you the handsomest journalist in strongman. No offense to anyone else. They're all wonderful people. Phil, World's Strongest Man 2024, what you got for me?
Returning to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for the second year in a row from May 1st to May 5th, a competition where there will be 2 days in the qualifying stage where athletes are paired up in groups, and then the winner and runner-up of those groups advance to the final after a stone-off, and then the 2-day final will take place on the 4th and the 5th. And this year, there's going to be somewhat of a difference, and I'll give you guys a little bit of rundown on what it's like to actually be covering the event live. Typically, there are 2 stages, or at least last year at Myrtle Beach, there are 2 stages where events take place. One is set up while another one is happening, and it lets the crew sort of get a head start. But that always poses some amount of problems because the equipment that they use sitting out in the extreme heat becomes very difficult. And we've seen that actually affect the competition in meaningful ways. So examples of this is the deadlift ladder, where the stage had gotten so hot where the deadlift ladder was that Kordiaka actually had to hop off the stage and didn't complete the deadlift ladder. Not because he was incapable, but because the floor was too hot for his feet. And so he had to hop off because it hurt. That's the kind of thing you don't want to have happen at the world stage. So I think that the adjustment from 2 stages to 1 is taking into account how do we minimize that kind of result from the elements rather than what the athletes are actually capable of.
Phil, are you going to bring sunscreen and sun protection this year? Because I remember the first year you went to World's Strongest Man, you got a little toasty. Just a reminder, Phil.
I think it is still insane that the World's Strongest Man is held in the densest heat in the hottest places in the world. When it was held in Sacramento, California, and I covered it every year that it was in Sacramento, and literally the average heat in Sacramento in the middle of the summer is 108 degrees. And they're like, let's do it away from all the trees. Let's just do it in the center in the open. It's chaos. These guys are already 400 pounds. They have breathing problems as it is. Why would you put them in 100-degree heat? And the same at Myrtle Beach. At least it's literally on the beach where there's a bit of a breeze and it's a little bit better. But yeah, definitely bring your sunscreen if you're going to go watch it live. I forgot a hat the first year, and I had to get this really weird brimmed hat, and it has bananas on the brim. And if you've seen me cover any of the videos for World's Strongest Man for Barbend, you'll see that I wear the banana brim hat as a bit because I'm known to the crew over there as Banana Brim Guy. So it's a whole thing, David. It's a whole thing.
Look, it makes for great TV. It makes for great lighting. I mean, you want to see these guys sweat. You want to see them work. It is made for TV, and it is great entertainment. Let's move on to something that is not held in the heat, in the outside normally, and that's weightlifting. At the IWF Grand Prix that wrapped up about a week ago in Doha, we talked about some of these world records in last week's broadcast. Olivia Rees of the United States, Carlos Nasser of Bulgaria. Well, Ling Xiaomei, which I might be saying incorrectly, but I'm trying, of China in the women's 81 kilogram category, set a new world record at 161 kilograms. She was the first to do it in the clean and jerk with 161 kilograms. Beautiful looking lift. And I want to point out, she is a member of the Chinese women's weightlifting team, which is the deepest roster of weightlifters on the planet. And by the way, as an 81 kilogram athlete, this clean and jerk was just a couple kilos under the American record for super heavies. It's a lot of weight.
Yeah, that's what I think is the most telling sign of like how insane and how far ahead the Chinese team is from everybody else. That their 81 kilo lifters are lifting more than super heavyweight lifters everywhere else in the world. Like that's the gap, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, the news at the Olympic Games in weightlifting is often when a woman wins a weight category and they're not from China.
Right.
Like that is a news story, honestly.
And it's also worth noting that the Grand Prix are qualifying events for Paris 2024. Yep. So like we are likely to see her compete again in the 81 kilogram category as long as this like continues until we get to the summer.
For those of us who aren't setting world records, our strength tip of the week is actually a series of tips for how to get stronger over 40. But really, I think this applies to anyone who is excited to get stronger, make improvements. Maybe it's on strength, body composition, you name it. And they're also trying to do this with a lifestyle that is very busy, where strength training maybe isn't their number one priority. Maybe they have career, family, other obligations, and you're not in your 20s anymore, right?
I mean, my plan when I get to 41 is to weigh 400 pounds, be 6'8", and get invited to a $300 million MMA tournament in Qatar. That's really where that's my target. That, you got to manifest stuff for yourself, folks. Yeah. You gotta put it out there. I think
Phil's been reading The Secret.
I think that the thing to do more, I think people naturally, as they get older and, take on additional things in their lives, whether it's, the kind of job that they lead, they start families and things like that. I think you just lose the sense of like your typical day-to-day activity that is physical. So I know that we have an example here, which is just to walk more. I think that encapsulates just being more consistently active. I know we've talked about it on previous episodes before, but consistency really is everything. And it's like we talked about the 12-3-30 method on our previous episode during the holiday episode, where you just get on the treadmill for a half hour at a reasonable intensity, and you just do that. And it's like it doesn't take long. It keeps you active. Like body at rest tends to stay at rest, right? Like you just got to get up and move, even if it's not super intense training. And I think consistency over the long term is a big deal for that. And then it's also the easiest way to maneuver around a schedule, particularly if you're one that's intense with a deep travel schedule, deep work schedule, family life, taking care of children, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. So I'm just going to read through these tips here. First is get your protein. Protein, very important macronutrient. I've talked to Dr. Jim Stepani about this on the podcast, I believe a couple times on the Barbell podcast, as well as for articles. Your protein requirements may actually increase with age when it comes to active lifestyle, muscle maintenance, and muscle building. So just keep that in mind. Get your protein. We've got some great resources on Barbell for protein tracking. Only gets more important as you age, by the way, because the body gets a little less efficient at protein synthesis. So you might actually need more protein in your diet to get similar results. That's thing number one. Adjusting exercise selection. Phil, you kind of touched upon this. You know what I used to really, really love? I used to love snatch balances. You know what doesn't treat me so well these days? Snatch balances.
Whatever your goals are should really equate to what your exercise selection should be. So, but something that I've adjusted to recently, I've had a lot of injuries on my right leg in particular. And so my mobility on my right ankle is much worse than my left. And so I'm constantly compensating for that when I do things like a heavy barbell squat. And so a lot of the times when I get into that space, if I'm not sufficiently warmed up and things like that, I'll move and do more accessory exercises to compensate for the fact that like putting a heavy barbell on my back is just not easy on my right ankle after all the injuries. And so equating for that, the thing is that there's a lot of really easy workarounds because compound exercises are just that. They are built from multiple exercises put together essentially. And just, you don't have to go break away from the basics too hard to get the workout that you're looking for.
Training volume, modulating training and volume intensity, and intensity is important. Look, the most important thing as you age might be just a realization that you might need to train less. That doesn't mean you need to stop training. But that means that you might need more recovery between bouts of exercise, right? And honestly, I think as I've started to realize that, I've realized that for a lot of my 20s and early 30s, I was actually overtraining, right? And I'm recovering better. And as I prioritize recovery, I feel better. Recovery also more important as I age.
You can get your 8 to 12 sets per muscle group in any time during the week. It can be in 2 sessions, 4 sessions, whatever it needs to be. The total cumulative volume at the end of the week is really ultimately what is more important than working out 4 to 5 times a week. So as long as you're training with enough intensity, which just means that you're going to muscular failure if your goal is hypertrophy, that if it's easier for you to train full body twice a week and that's what you recover from, do it. If you need to go 4 times a week and break it up, upper body, lower body, whatever that is, but you get the same number of sets in that you would if you had trained twice a week, great. That has shown to be effective. And that's where the position stand is right now on the research.
Another thing I want to say that's not antithetical to that is deloads, right? Deloads can be really useful if used appropriately. If you are experiencing cumulative wear and tear and you honestly feel fried physiologically, neurologically, a deload week where you're not stopping to move, but you are really dialing back training intensity and volume for a temporary period of time while still working on some movement patterns and staying active, which does promote recovery, that can be really useful. It's something that strength athletes who are used to periodized training, they know. Deloading before competition, deloading between training cycles, they know. But it's something that even folks who are not actively competing can take a lesson from. Right. So I think that when I was a competitive strength athlete, yes, deloads were baked in. My coach baked those in. Since I'm not really competing these days, I don't necessarily think to deload, but those can still be impactful periods and can help with long-term progress. Walking more. Is walking the most underrated exercise? Like even for strength athletes? I think it is, actually.
I think it is just because it sounds too easy.
You want to recover better from training? Walk more. Like honestly, you're not going to like walk off your gains, but you want to recover better? Just walk more. Like it sounds stupid, but it's good for mobility. It's good for cardiovascular health. It's good for weight management. It's good for recovery. Like it will actually improve your recovery from intense strength training. Walking, anecdotally for me, has greatly improved my recovery. It's greatly improved my mental health and well-being. And I think it's something that strength athletes should focus more on. And that's something that my old school weightlifting coaches always used to tell me. You should walk more. The last thing I want to point out, Phil, because I know you agree with that, because you're the one who introduced it. Variety, mobility, and core work become more important as you age. Bodyweight training, Pilates, yoga, core-specific training. Something that's been important for me as I get older, but I still want to maintain activity levels. The McGill Big Three, right? Which you can look up on Barbend. We can link it in the description below. Maybe in a card here. Boop. These are all things that have been shown to improve recovery, allowing your body a greater opportunity, an improved opportunity to heal and recover between intensive bouts of strength training. And that is the key here. As you age, recovery more and more important. Phil, I'm going to hop off the soapbox. Do you want to hop on for even just a second to wrap that up?
Yeah, I'm just going to continue a theme here on Strength Weekly. Oh, you think you're strong? You think you're a powerful, strong human? Go take a Pilates class.
Take a Pilates class.
You ain't strong. You ain't strong. You ain't strong. Take a Pilates class.
You ain't Pilates strong.
You ain't Pilates strong if you ain't taking Pilates class.
Man, it is humbling. Humble pie. Well, we love eating humble pie here on Strength Weekly. It is our favorite holiday dish. And that'll bring you the end of Strength Weekly, the last episode of the year. But we'll be back. We'll be back in early January. We're not going far for too long. Happy holidays, folks, for Strength Weekly. I'm David Thomas Tao, joined by
Phil Blackman. I got to go and, live up to what I just said. I'm going to go do some Pilates.
Practice what we preach. Happy holidays, folks. Catch you in the new year.